right, everybody, welcome today to our author talk here at the Sister Bay Liberty Grove Library with Gail Kittleson, and thank you all for coming. Quick thank you to our sponsor, the James P. Jordan Memorial Fund, for bringing Gail here today. She also did a writing workshop with us on Saturday, and we have some people that participated on that. That's also up on our YouTube channel if you wanted to watch that. She taught about creating settings and researching historical characters for historical novels. And Gail, today we're recording this Facebook Live, and it'll also be up on our Facebook, or on our YouTube page for viewing later. She has a number of books that she's published, which is super impressive. And when she first approached me about coming here, she had mentioned that she's teaching at the Clearing this week, which many of you, we talked about before, you're in the class, which is wonderful that you're joining us here today. Thank you for coming to our library. And I am looking forward to hearing about your book, Gail, today. And just so people know, we actually do have 2 in our library system that you can even check out. She also has some available here for purchase if you'd like to own your own. And just also wanted to give a quick shout out, like Gail, we also have an author talk next week with Roger Simpson, The Truth and Hope. That's a book that we have available for checkout here. We do have some flyers about his event. It's next Friday at 1:30, also sponsored by the James P. Jordan Memorial Fund. He's a local author here, and he passed away last year, and a lot of generous donors put into that fund, and we're doing a lot of programming with authors to bring authors in different capacities, whether it's writing workshops or author talks, and so we're very blessed by this sponsorship with that fund. And if anybody would like information on any of our other events here at this library or any of our other branches in Door County, we have 8 branches across the county. We have monthly flyers that come out throughout the year. This one is our August calendar, and it promotes different things happening at all 8 locations, so feel free to pick one of those up if you'd like at the desk. And Gail, I'll let you take it away and talk about the work that you do.
Thank you, Christina, for inviting me.
Yeah.
And actually, she had a big role in picking exactly what the talk would be about, which books to emphasize. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I am obedient.
Well, we have, as you've probably seen, and if this is your first time in the library, our fiction section is over here. And the color coding, it's that big blue section there, that's mystery. So we have a lot of mystery readers here.
I walked through that on Saturday.
It's very visually impactful to see it that way. And cozy mysteries, in particular historical novels, it's just like such a great combination with our community here of what you actually write. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, well, thank you for coming. And Maggie, thank you for doing your, whatever you're doing over there, your magic with the technology, which I would be absolutely hopeless at. So it's wonderful that you know what you're doing. I brought a smattering of my books, and the ones I'm going to focus on, as I just said, the most recent one is A Mystery on Church Street, and it came out in March. It released in March. I have a wonderful publisher. He's in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's very good with covers. He's very good with the backs, and he writes all the back cover copy, which, to be totally honest, is much harder to write than the whole book. For me, it's very, very hard. For me to be objective, you have to, of course he reads every book and very closely, so he knows what it's about, but he knows how to pick out what would draw the reader's attention and hook people. And that's what, of course, the back cover is all about. You pick it up, you look at it, you read that, you think, I mean, what's the answer to that? How does that go? And if you're hooked enough, you buy the book. And so I really appreciate having a really wonderful publisher. And how it works, in case you're interested, is I buy my books back from him. He publishes them, I buy them back, I get a good discount, and they're shipped to me, so shipping, COVID made that much worse, of course, like it did for everybody and everything. But, and so that's just, kind of the nuts and bolts of how that works. And someone asked in my class, how did you find your publisher? How did you go about that? Well, I don't remember. It's terrible. I remember how I found my very first publisher. I have a couple books that aren't here. My very first book is actually coming out in a revised version this fall. And the reason for that is I got to looking at it after 15 years maybe. And mostly I don't even look at them once they come out. I'm so sick of them. I still love the character, but I'm so sick of the process. Although, as I'm doing it, I mean, I love to even edit. I love all of it, but you get so exhausted. It's very hard, intensive. You know, you have to just glue yourself to the seat and sit there and just slug this out, you know. And so, by the time it releases, I seriously, it's like, wonderful, but that's where I fall short, because promoting is so important, and I don't have the energy for it by the time and I'm already started on another book, so you know I'm kind of in a. So if you end up liking my books, please put a review on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble. They're on Smashwords and all kinds of places. I don't even know all the places he sells them on, but those reviews make a huge difference to the author. And so, you know, I don't have many, I have like 5, I think 4 or 5 on this. I should have 25, 35, 45. So that would be a wonderful gift if you like the book. If you don't have to read it. No, anyway. So this is a really different genre that I had never done. I never thought I would do, but then I never thought I would do any of this. So there you go. I'm kind of living my never thought I would do this life, and it's fun. I'm not sure what motivated me to do a cozy mystery, except I started liking them. I never used to be a mystery person. It just wasn't my thing, although I read The Beautiful Mystery by, what's her name? Shelley Penny. Her last name is Penny. Shirley Penny, The Beautiful Mystery. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is such a beautiful book, even though it's a mystery, you know. And so I think maybe that reading had a bit of gets a bit of credit for how I ended up writing a cozy mystery. And do you know by definition what a cozy mystery is? The difference between a mystery and a cozy mystery? A cozy mystery has just the little gore, just the murder, maybe just the flash scene, and that's in here, and I won't ruin it for you, but you know, so there's a little gore is the best word, and you know the person is dead. And then a very unlikely person does the investigating. Right? So in this one, it's Madge and Bill, a newspaper editor and his wife in a small town in northern Iowa. And, you know, I can't imagine where that would be. I'm from northern Iowa, but I never put a name, not a real name, on the town I'm writing about. And that's to cover my behind. I mean, the banker might get mad at you, or whoever you paint with a little bit of a negative shade to them. And so I'm very careful, but I do mention real towns and go research what was in that town. And for example, in this book, there's a young couple, and they go on a kind of a weird date. I mean, it's supposed to be the whole church youth group, and nobody else comes, and they end up going anyway. It's a girl, and then it's the new pastor in town who's single and quite available. And according to the mothers who are thinking about their daughters ending up with a good husband. And so they go to a town called Riceville, which is not that far from where we live. And I've been there, and in fact, I've spoken in the library different times, and that's why they ended up being in here probably. And I say probably because I don't plan this stuff out. It happens as I write. As I write, off we go. And things come to me. Actually, the character comes to me first and starts whispering her or his story in my ear, and I just start writing. As I said before, I'm obedient. I write and write and write, and I forget about eating, and my husband has to make a path through the house. It's not my problem. So that's kind of how that goes in our household. I get captivated by this character that comes to me, and I'm a goner until she or he owns me, until I write the end. Yeah, it's quite a ride. Anyway, so I was telling you about Riceville, and this little town way back had a man, I think his name was Brown, and he, I think there was a really bad fire there, and then he realized there was nothing to do really in town, and he created this theater, and they have the wonderful old draperies, heavy draperies, and with the pictures on them, with the painted scenes on them for in between the scenes of the plays, okay? And they would switch those, and that was part of the whole thing. It was part of the attraction of the whole thing were those heavy draperies. Well, they're in here, and they're real. They're in Riceville, and they're in the library. They built a special room, and so they recreated the stage of the old theater, and the draperies are hanging there. And I saw them when I was doing a book talk one time, a long time ago, and then many years later, when I was writing this, I'm like, I know where they can go on their date. They can go to a play, right? At Riceville. And so, I mean, that's about as close to real as it gets as far as naming places and towns. You know where the setting is. You know you're in northern Iowa, or you're in London on the East End, or you're behind the lines with the French resistance, or you're in North Africa, or you're in the Philippines. It's all World War II, okay? And so I've written about a lot of different theaters of World War II. Again, I did not have that planned out. That's just kind of how it all evolved. In the writing world, there are two kinds of writers, they say. There's the plotter, and there's the seat of the pants. Guess which one? I am the seat of the pants all the way. I really am. And there's other people, but it's certainly not the only way to do it. I wouldn't say it's the most effective way, or definitely not the most efficient. You end up doing a lot more rewriting and stuff. If I knew how to be a plotter, I mean, if I could do it that way, I would. But that's not how it happens for me. It's all about this character who comes to me. Some people, the plot comes first. You know, what if we had somebody killed in the library in Sister Bay in 1943? Yeah. And they give this wonderful plot. That's not me. It's the character for me. It's the character. So, and neither one is better than the other. It's just every writer is different. So I would not. I don't think you could teach somebody to be seat of the pants. But if you could, that's not what I would be doing. I would be saying, here, there's these two ways. Which one fits you best? Yeah. So Madge and Bill are the newspaper owner and his wife, which is how it would have been in those days. These days, you would say this couple owns the newspaper, right? But it was Bill's. It was passed on from his father, and Madge did all the secretarial. You know, she's the one writing the obituaries and taking in the thank you very much when our son was home from leave. You all brought special treats for him. Thank you so much. Those little thank yous that appear in small town newspapers. Thank you for helping us get the crop in when my husband broke his leg. That kind of thing. You know, thank you to the community. And so that's what Madge and Bill do in their regular life. But Madge, she's a sleuth by heart, by nature. She's a born sleuth. She's the one who loses sleep. Well, they both lose sleep over this, but she loses more. And she gets these ideas, and she thinks, oh, what if the murderer did this? You know, and then she'll go check that out. And she ends up getting in some trouble on the way when she does some of these things, these crazy ideas that come to her about but maybe inspired. How does she know unless she checks it out, right? And Bill, of course, is the more sedate one. On top of that, he's a World War I veteran, suffering from some PTS, and of course there was no support back then for that, and no name for it even. It was called what? Shell shock. He was shell shocked. He had injuries from World War I, and then he was a patriot, and when World War II came along, he was in his early 40s. We never say exactly, but he just felt, he was with the Guard, the National Guard, and he felt that he needed to go because he remembered what it was like to be in the trenches and to be completely untrained almost, they got almost no training back then. And so then to face this enemy and go through all that. And he just thought, if I had a son going, I'd want somebody like me there in the background, just there to be a guide, to be a help. And so he gradually talks Matt into that. And so he ends up in World War II as well, in North Africa. And but the book begins, and so that's all background. You don't learn that immediately. It's all background. And when he comes back, while he's gone, she holds everything together, right? She makes sure. They have somebody from another town, another editor, come and run the press, but she does all the work and keeps the family together and all that. And so now together, they hear the news that someone has been killed, murdered in their church basement in the kitchen. And so, are they the kind of people who are just going to sit by and let the sheriff take care of this? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And then it's wonderful because the sheriff, another aspect of World War II that's in here is the POW camps. There was one in Sturgeon Bay. There were different ones around here on this, I call it an island because you've got that canal, right, which kind of makes it an island. I don't know about kind of. Anyway, and so the sheriff gets called into a small town near where I live called Waverly, where there was a branch camp, and a lot of law enforcement people got called in to help, be guards and be administrators at those places, okay? And so that happens with this sheriff. And so he comes to Bill and says, would you be willing, I know you've been through a lot, but would you be willing to take my place during this time? This temporary time, and I don't know how long it'll be exactly. Well, it's like, whoa. Man, just like, okay, now we can really do it. We can really investigate, So that's the background of A Mystery on Church Street. Any questions about it? I'll take maybe questions for each book as we go. Yeah.
Well, in reading about writing, there's this bit about the arc of the story.
The character arc.
And you start with the characters, so you haven't planned out the arc of the story. How do you get from A to B?
I write. I start writing. That is my answer. Just like with memoir, which is what I'm teaching at the clinic, I start writing. I listen, I do my research. So here's Bill, I've got the man and the wife, okay, in my mind a little bit. So then I start researching, okay, where was Bill in North Africa? Where were the North Iowa units sent? Where did they train? What did they do? What happened to them? He one of the places he was, where he was wounded, was the Battle of the Kasserine Pass, which is hard to talk about because it was one of those early ones where the United States had such huge losses, and commanders made such ridiculous, stupid mistakes. You just want to just knock them to the other side of the room. How could they be so stupid? But they weren't ready either. Nobody was ready, not really. So it was a time for mercy on everybody. Everybody was pretty much doing their best. There were some who were out for glory. MacArthur was one. He had his picture crew photo crew with him, and that's why we have so many pictures of him. It was quite political, but most of the people in the military weren't like that. And so that may sound too simplistic, but that's what I do. I start writing and I think, okay, he had to be somewhere, where was he? So I research until it gels with me. Oh, this would work. This would work. He could have been at the Kasserine Pass. It's the right timeline, right? It fits in there. And he had some time in Walter Reed, and then he had some time at a recovery hospital down in the southeast Alabama, I forget, Alabama, Arkansas. And, I think the timeline fits. I think he was at the Battle of the Kasserine Pass. It just kind of gels in my heart. And so then I start writing about that, And then I keep going to the next step. Well, what did she do while I was gone? Well, what would you have to do in a newspaper office? And you've got a daughter at home yet. Your other 2 daughters have gone off to work in munitions, like in California. Girls were making bombs. I mean, it was, the stress of that time is hard to overemphasize. We think we've got the worst stress ever, right? I don't think so. I really don't. Yeah. Anyway, that's another subject. But so yeah, and okay, so this new pastor comes to town, to their church. Well, what about that? Where'd he come from? Where'd he go to seminary? So you have to research that, figure that out. What did he do before that? What was his background? So all those things are points for research. And the thing, you can't call it historical fiction unless you do that research. If you just want to write fiction, fine, but don't call it historical fiction. Historical fiction has to be carefully researched. So I'll give you an example of what happens, let's see, this book, about the war in the Philippines. Okay, so I was reading about, and my sources, you can Google all this stuff, but you can't trust totally what comes up. You don't know who wrote that, you don't know where they got their information, or if they made it up, you just don't know. But that's not to say I don't get a lot of information from there, I do. But so I want real textbooks. I want primary sources, is what we call them. Most of all, I want to interview World War II people, and I got to do that. Now it's getting pretty tough to find one, a guy who was actually in the fighting. But near us, I found there was a man who was in the Navy, and oh my goodness, and I used that in this book. I went and sat by his kitchen table with his wife. They were in their 90s, and what a vivid. I mean, it was all like yesterday to them. It was like I was in this golden treasure library, Whew. And just tried to take it all in. And he's since died. But he told me about he was sent first to Louisiana. A lot of them trained in Louisiana, in the swamps and just humidity and awful, conditions. But they had mock wars there, and they had 2 different sides, all American troops, and they did mock battles and tried to get them trained and ready. Well, he got sick, and I forget what he caught, but anyway, he got sick enough to be put in the hospital, and so because of that, he missed leaving with his unit. When they got on the ship, when they went to California and boarded the ship to go down to the South Pacific, he was sick. And so he and 3 other guys ended up going to California, and they got on a merchant marine ship. And he said, it was a fabulous cruise. The only cruise I ever had in my life. And he said, what was wonderful was we had nothing to do. I mean, the merchant marines hired their own people to do the work on the ship, and these guys were just being taken along. So they had this vacation on the way down. And trust me, they were going to need it. They needed that because they weren't going to get it there. So I used, and his images were so clear. I mean, you couldn't find it on Google. He washed his shirt. He'd lean over the edge of the ship and wash his shirt in the spray from the waters. I can't remember. Anyway, the spray. And he remembered the effervescence, all the lights and everything sparkling in that water, and all these wonderful details that you really want to have if you're writing fiction, and you have to dream them up from somewhere, from your research. He gave them to me. He gave a lot of them to me. So I just was so grateful. He was very patient, and anyway, and so this, I never really thought I would write about the war in the Philippines, but a character came to me who really wanted to be a nurse, and she was kind of a rebel, about a 16-year-old, and she was, crawling down the front porch in the middle of a snowstorm, or sliding down the pipe, the eve pipe, to go play bingo in the back of the bar. And her dad was going off to war. So it was a real rough time for her. Long story short, she started working at the POW camp in Algona, Iowa, which was one of the largest, if not the largest. It was huge. It was out in the middle of a cornfield. And they would bring in, and they were all German POWs. They were the devotees of Hitler, the Wehrmacht. And so they brought them by night along on the train. I can just picture this and get shivers, and unloaded them, and out at the camp in the middle of nowhere, so they didn't know if they were near a town. They were very near a town, but they didn't know that. There were no lights, no electric, farms didn't have electricity then, but the army shipped it in and made a hospital, electrified, and it was just an incredible POW camp. And now there's a museum there, and I've gone there and did a lot of research there, and gotten to know some of the Vietnam vets who man that and keep that going and make it a really cool place. Anyway, so I just, that POW camp is what kind of stirred me to write this, and it made sense. It just made sense. And so this army guy was, when people were wounded, sometimes if they weren't able to go back to fight more, they were sent to a POW camp to be a guard, because there was a man shortage in the country, and it was hard to find enough people. And I mean, can you imagine that? Guarding these people who may have been the ones who were shooting at you a few months ago. It had to be tough. It had to be really tough. In this case, this guy had been in the Philippines, and he'd been wounded, and he was brought out and recovered as much as he could. They told him, there was not going to be, it was a leg wound, and there was not going to be a real recovery, but he wanted to go back. All he wanted to do was go back and be with his men again. And that's the band of brothers thing. I mean, you don't want to forsake your people. And so he found a way. And so I was sitting reading a textbook at home, and I remember the moment, I said, I thought, wow, 77,000 were captured by the Japanese. That includes Filipinos, but that's a lot of soldiers. It's jungle territory, it's mountainous terrain, there's an ocean to jump into, a bay to jump into. Surely some escaped, on the trail, or there must have been some who escaped. So I said to my husband, who's much more of a military guru by far than I am, and I said, so is it credible that some would have escaped? And he said, I said, is that a credible idea? And he doesn't say yes too often to that question from me. And he said, yes, I think that's credible. And so I set out to find proof. I couldn't have used that. That's what makes this historical fiction. If I had just done that without proving it, that it really could have happened or did happen, it would have just been fiction. So that's the difference. It's a big, important difference to me. It's an authenticity thing. If there's anything I want to be, it's authentic. I can't even talk anymore. It's my students' fault. Anyway, so that's that book. And that's not the one I was gonna talk about first, but it is one of them, and it tells you how it all comes together a little bit. So the other one that I wanna focus on is Land That I Love, which, I'll just pass it around. And I'll pass this around too. Oops. I'll give it to that row. Yeah, feel free to look at it. So Land That I Love, that comes out of a patriotic song, right? Land that I love, stand beside her. Yeah, okay. And that's where that title came from. And again, my publisher did this absolutely bang-up job on his part of this. He captured the moral premise of this book, the father's love for his only son. And he's a single father. I won't tell you all the details, but they emigrate from England just before war really breaks out. It's 1938, and they come to the hill country of Texas, which is, if those of you who know the hill country, anyway, it's north of San Antonio, west of Austin. So if you can kind of picture that, it's that part of Texas. And it's quite dry, kind of like high desert country, I would almost say, I think. Very rocky, but a lot of German settlers came there in the 1840s and onward. And one of their founders, John Musevac, was a Prussian who gave up his nobility. He would have been a prince if he had stayed there. He gave that up in order to lead a whole bunch of hundreds and hundreds of settlers, would-be settlers, to Texas. They they landed at the port at, it's close to Galveston, I can't think of the name, it starts with an I. Anyway, and then they went, with horse carts and whatever they could find over to the hill country, which was, I can't remember any of these details right now. I'm not responsible for them, but they're in here. 125 miles or 200, something like that. Quite an arduous journey in the heat of Texas, and John was on horseback, and he had them at New Braunfels. New Braunfels. Well, so he took off and thought, well, okay, where are these people? He knew where the land tract was, this huge tract of land that he had bought basically from the American government. And he went off to find out, okay, so exactly where are we going? Where am I taking these people? Can you imagine the courage? And he was responsible for all of that. Okay, so he's on his horse and he crosses the Pedernales River and he looks at this expanse. Can you hear my shoulder? This expanse of green, beautiful hill. And he thinks, this is it. So north of New Braunfels there, and all around that area, there's town after town after town. Comfort, Mason, Llano, it goes on and on. All these little towns, all founded by him. It's just incredible, the impact one person can have. And it was German settlers with, arduous work ethic, and they built these big water tank things that I've never seen anywhere else. It's kind of like a silo, and on the bottom is your water, and it keeps the water cool. I don't exactly get it, but in Texas, even in the heat, they always had a source of water. They were engineers. He was a botanist and a biologist. He crossbred German Friesians, I think you pronounce it, Friesian cattle with longhorns, so they would be able to withstand the conditions there. He planted a gazillion fruit tree kinds and cross. What do you call that? With animals, it's breeding. It's grafting. Grafting. Yeah. He made new kinds that could live there. Vineyards. It's like kind of what happened with Israel. It suddenly blossomed, and just an incredible thing that man did. A lot of things he did, and so as I was researching this, so I called the Mason County Library, where Mason is, and that's in the heart of the hill country, and said, I need help. I'm an author, and I'm not afraid to ask for help, usually. And so I just do that. I try to think, where am I gonna get help? And well, how about the library? So I called there. They have a man there, his name is Charles Eckert. He's in his 80s. He has a room all of his own in the library. I mean, does that sound like heaven? A room of your own in the library. Anyway, so he goes there every afternoon and just archives stuff. And I don't know what all he does in there, but it's Charles's room. They sicked him on me. And we talked on the phone, and he started sending me information in manila envelopes, copied from these old textbooks, which I could never have found in Iowa, and sending all of this information. And as I read through it, this place called Loyal Valley kept coming to me. Is that a cool name for a town? What? Loyal Valley. It was named that because this was Civil War. By this time, it was Civil War time, or pre-Civil War, and the German settlers were faithful to the Union, loyal to the Union. But Texas, what happened? They voted to go with the Confederacy. Here were these Germans. They were all about being faithful to the Union. So it was called something else before, like Coldwater Creek or something. No, that's a clothing thing, isn't it? Coldwater Creek. Well, it was something like. Anyway, they changed the name to Loyal Valley. They had guts. Okay, they had stamina to stand up for what they believed, and many of them at the Nueces massacre died because of it. Confederates, as they were going to Mexico, so they didn't have to fight against the Union. The Confederates heard about it. You can look it up, Nueces, Nueces massacre. And so a lot of these German farmers were killed for their loyalty to the Union. Anyway, so back to my main character. He brings his little boy. He was raised on his grandfather and grandmother's estate, and he lost his wife, and his grandparents had died, and then the whole house burned down. The whole beautiful old house in England. It was basically in Sherwood Forest. So there's a metaphor running through this. Okay, and he thinks about his grandfather. His grandfather loved the United States, and he thought that it was a dream of his. A basket, what do you call that? His basket,
bucket list.
Bucket list, thank you. His bucket list was in there. He would have gone to the United States if he could have, but it didn't happen for him. So he kept thinking, well, maybe I can do that. Maybe we can go to the United States. And his former butler, his grandfather's former butler, went along. And he had been like a mentor, father type person to him his whole life and loved his little boy. So here's these three males coming, and they come to New York, and they go to a real estate office, and they see something. All they know is they want to go somewhere where they can work with apples, do orcharding. I'm having trouble telling words. Anyway, have an orchard and work with apples. Texas wouldn't be your first thought. It would be Washington or Pennsylvania or a whole bunch of other places that would be much easier than doing it in Texas. But they find this real estate flyer that says, fully grown orchards, peaches, apples, pecans, all the things that do grow in Texas. If you've got John Newsback 100 years before that was there, preparing all these things and making sure there's food for all these people. Okay, so they go to John's country. And so these two generations kind of dovetail together. And so then I guess that's kind of enough to tell you about this, maybe to whet your appetite. So any questions at this point? Yes.
Well, I don't wanna keep anybody else from asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
When, do you start with the idea of a character, do you then go off and do your research and then your story, or is it back and forth with
It's back and
research and
forth.
story?
Back and forth.
So you hit a stumbling block and you say, I need to go do more research and figure
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
what to do next.
A question comes to me like, oh, so, I mean, who are their neighbors? This is now 1938, 39. So who were they around? What kind of challenges were they going to have? What was this going to be like? Fredericksburg is the town that they actually came into. And there was a very brief period of time. I had to research a lot to find this. How did they get there? It's not easy. I mean, they took the Wabash Cannonball, and they learned a lot about America along the way, you know. And then they came, you know, into Dallas, Fort Worth, and the big, you know, cattle sale yards, and acres and acres of cattle there. And then they come down, and eventually, and it's like, oops, but how do they get to Fredericksburg? It's hilly country. I mean, did they take that shuttle? I mean, how did they get there? Did they hire a wagon? Well, what they did, it works out that there was a very short period, because of the pink granite under the whole of basically that part of Texas, very tough stuff, almost impossible to dynamite. They couldn't put a train through, but they did, just as far as Fredericksburg, and it was only usable for maybe used about a year and a half, and that was during this time. So they took the train in, and see, when things dovetail like that for me, it's like, okay, this is gonna work. This is gonna work. I don't have to rewrite the last 3 chapters. It's great. And then I go on from there. Yes.
I know you say you start with the character,
Yeah.
but I noticed a little bit of a theme. You seem to find details. I've never heard of the loyalists and that they were killed or anything.
I hadn't either.
You hadn't either. That was my question.
No.
So that was something you stumbled upon with your research.
And above all, I love to learn. So I'm learning constantly. So cool.
Do you find though, when you stumble upon those events, that obscure events, I'm going to say
Yeah.
obscure, that helps you with the writing or helps with the book itself?
Oh, yes.
How much emphasis do you give when you stumble upon an event like that in the book?
I don't write much about those men dying.
No.
I mean, but it just tells me, it sets the scene for me.
Okay.
They're coming to country where these people, they have been willing to die for a lot of different causes all along the way. And they're still really tough-minded. I mean, are they gonna be friendly to this new immigrant and his little son, who are English people? I mean, what's that gonna be like? What's that gonna be like? Are they gonna find prejudice here? So then I just do some more research on that. Yes.
Do you find that a lot of your personality goes into this main character? And how do you keep that from happening? That's a great question.
Do you think it's that bad?
No, but I
I'm
mean,
teasing.
you know what?
Yeah, I do. I don't worry about that. I'm the one who's given this story to write.
Okay,
So if part of me goes in there, it's Skippy,
it just happens.
if it works.
Yeah, one more question. With your characters, so I've gotten the impression that these kind of are imaginary. In other words,
Totally.
they get built as you go along, or as you form them in your brain and then you start writing.
Yeah.
But have you ever written a book with someone in mind?
Yes.
And they are your main character, but they're
Yes.
actually a real person with a different
Yes.
name, maybe a different time.
I can't believe you asked that. Only once.
Only once.
And that's Dorothy Webeking. And she, Wobbebekkking, I think, from Waterloo, Iowa, which is where the Sullivan brothers grew up. Her older brothers played with the Sullivan brothers down the street when they were growing up. So Dorothy, you've got her placed now. And she became a nurse. Her mother didn't want her to become a nurse. Her mother was a very domineering German mother, but Dorothy's character was such that she became a nurse. She found a way. And she became the nurse at Drake University in Des Moines. And during her time there, her tenure there as a nurse, the only nurse, can you imagine, a whole university, she was the medical unit, just one nurse, okay?
Wow.
That's the times, it was the way it was. And so, she got a letter from the American government saying, we're at war now. If you join up with the Army Nurse Corps, which we're forming, we will pay for further education after the war. She jumped at it. She was all about learning. Now that may be kind of me in there, okay? I'm just all about that. But it didn't need to be because she was all about that. And she was a well-documented person. Although she still isn't working on it, but she's still not in the Iowa Hall of Fame. My father-in-law is, you know, but she's not. Because she's a woman, because she's a nurse, I don't know.
So that was an autobiography then?
No. This is historical fiction. I fictionalized her story
Okay.
because I don't want to write a biography. It's too dry. I don't think it would work for me. So no, it's a fiction. It's historical fiction, just like all the rest. But I didn't have to make things up. I had to toss things out because she was incredible. I could never have made up what she did.
But you used her real name.
I did. Absolutely. I talked with her family. I got to go to near Joliet, Illinois, and see the house she lived in until she was 98, I think. I missed her by 3 years. And she was even learning to ski in her 90s. She was just something else. Just one of those incredible power women who never stops. I think this is correct. I think she started the intensive care unit in Joliet, Illinois. I mean, pretty much single-handedly. She stayed as a nurse. She's probably one of those people that the hospital was so glad when she finally retired because and then she worked at the consignment shop, you know, in the basement. She just was a devoted worker person. Had 3 children. I got to meet them all. And here's how this started. I love this story. I really have nothing to do with it. I mean, and that's how I feel about a lot of this. It comes to me. It's my gift, and then I try to obey and do what I'm supposed to do with it, you know, which is right. And so I was, because I've gone to a lot of writing conferences, taken a lot of workshops, and so you're advised to be on Instagram, be on Facebook, have an author page, yada yada, have a website. So I have a website, I have a Facebook author page, I have Instagram, but I don't even know how to go there, okay? But it sort of automatically comes to my phone and says, you have 65 new followers. Well, yay, I hope they buy my book. But they don't, because if you think I'm this big successful author, forget that. It may look like it, but anyway, so I mean, if I were paid, you know, when I get paid for I can just tell you, like $37 a month, that's for like 16, 17 books. It's my take. It's just ridiculous. It's because I don't know how to promote. I shouldn't say I don't know how. I know how. I don't have the energy. I want to write books.
This is not fun.
No, this is promotion. This is fun because you're people. And I can look into your eyes, but I don't want to sit at the computer and, I don't know, do whatever you have to do to make big stuff happen. I need help. As I told her the other day when I did my workshop here, I really, really need help. But help costs money. And I'm also very frugal, and it's hard. It's just hard. You know? Yes.
You describe yourself as a seat of the pants writer.
Yeah.
Do you get any enjoyment out of that, and what is it that you enjoy?
Being a seat of the pants.
Yes.
Did I finish the other question? What was it? Whatever. Okay, good. I get a lot of enjoyment. I mean, here I am walking down the street, or I'm taking my shower, or something, and this character appears to me. Oh my gosh. This is so cool.
In your imagination, because you just said you were in the shower, so we're just going to clarify that.
Thank you very much.
I mean, your husband's not here, but, you know.
Well,
Maybe.
yeah, so let me tell you how my first character came to me. So maybe it'll make more sense. I mean, I don't know if it makes any sense. And it doesn't matter to me if it does. I know it's true. It's what happens to me. And so near us, we live in a town of 1,000, if you can picture, in Iowa, northern Iowa, 6 miles south of the Minnesota border in the central part of the state. It kind of strays off in Minneapolis a couple hours. Okay, so one day I was helping my friend do, she sold it now, but it was a bed and breakfast, not an Airbnb, a bed and breakfast. And she used to do lunches. And so people come to our little town, we have a couple shops, nothing like this. But anyway, and once in a while she'll have a slew of women come in for lunch. And she used to call me and say, can you come over here, quick? I need somebody to make toast, or I don't know, clean the toilet, or do something, and I'm like, yeah, be right over. And I'm like half a block away, and I race over there. I don't race anymore, but I used to race over there and do whatever she needed, behind the scenes. And one day, these are golden moments, I call them. So I was up in the upstairs in this wonderful old Victorian massive house, and the hallway goes like this. And the upstairs, beautiful wooden, and she left it just like that. She didn't pay somebody to get it straightened out. It's like that. And so I had linens in my hand. I opened up the linen closet door. I'm about to put these on the shelf, and all of a sudden, I think, oh my goodness, if this were 1940, if this were the 40s, this would be a boarding house, not a bed and breakfast. And there would be a bunch of men living here, working for farmers, harvesting the corn, planting the corn, slopping the hogs, doing whatever. But they live here. They're unmarried, and they would live here, and there would be some woman just breaking her neck, making this place homey, cleaning it, washing their clothes, baking pies, making dinner at night. And this woman would be the center of that part of their world, making everything fine there. She wouldn't live there, but so that was my very first character named Dottie. I love her. I love them all. Except I just don't want to read about them. I'm sick of them. At the same time, for a while I am, after the book comes out. And so this is the seat of the pants thing. I think I'm answering your question in a roundabout way. And so there she is. All of a sudden, there's this Dottie in my life. And I think, oh my gosh, where did she live? Not too far from here, probably. She wouldn't have had a car, probably. Is she a widow? Does she have kids? How old is she? On and on and on, And she's a widow. And she's also, her son died in North Africa. It seems to be a recurring theme. That could be because my father was in North Africa. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, but that makes sense, right? I mean, not that he ever talked about it, ever. But it all starts coming together, this story in this small town, not named, but my town is named. Evolving into this story with a lot of World War II history in it. But I, try to weave it in. It's just part of the story. They're listening to the radio. Everybody was constantly listening to the radio for the war reports. While they're doing that, here's what's happening over in so-and-so. Now we've invaded Burma, or whatever it was. Now this is happening. Churchill is meeting with Stalin and Mussolini, my brain. Anyway, they're having this meeting, Casablanca. Anyway, they're having this meeting and trying to figure out the next steps of the war, blah, blah, blah. And so all this is coming in on the radio. A lot of it comes in on the radio. Or the newspaper. That was what they had, And there just happens to be a guy who was in World War I, right down the street, or next door to Dottie. And they both were widower and widow. And that's all I'll say about that, yes.
Obviously, the 1940s is your era. Do you think you'll ever venture out of that?
I have. Yes, I have. What a leading question.
She did not pay me for that, just saying.
Right into, so another book I wrote, this is a Civil War era book. But I don't do it very often. And it was tough, it took me 10 years working on this every winter where we are down in Arizona. I mean, it just wasn't good enough, and I kept working on it. And it just finally, it took a long time because I wasn't familiar. You know, I used to think it would be the easiest to write about like Janet Oakes' era, which this. In fact, I thought that's all I would be able to do. Because I don't know, because I'd read it a lot, and it, go west in the constant wagon, it's well documented, why you figure out what they ate, and, you know, all that stuff. But it wasn't easy. It was not easy at all. So it's more the history of Arizona Territory, way back when General Crook built the first road over the Muggy and Rim, and we have a little cabin under the Muggy and Rim. And so this ended up taking place on the property we have, because I met one of the guys who worked on our house, excavating it. He said, "Do you know they found an Indian grindstone when they were excavating for your house." So somebody else got it with that and made a fortune, you know. But we find pottery shards there after a heavy rain, sometimes even with little, you know, the paint still after all this time. Is that incredible? Anyway, so I think, you know, that's kind of what this book came out of. But I really had to research hard to make it right.
So historical fiction, your characters, you're free, your area you can play with, but you better have your facts straight.
Oh, have to. Or you just cannot call it that. It's
There's
not.
there's no poetic license when it comes to events.
Not to, no.
Okay.
No, you've got to have a historical timeline.
Timeline is the
Section.
skeleton, and you can flesh that out from there.
You figure out what happens to your characters along that. And I didn't know the timeline. I mean, I had to learn it. Have it plastered up there on the wall in front of me, and like, what happened first? What happened? And my husband, he remembers he knows all that. So he was a history major. He knows all that stuff, just and remembers it. Truly, he's great at Trivial Pursuit. I mean, that's not me. And so I have to. That's the hardest part of what I
For
do.
you, it's the characters.
For me, it's the characters and the emotion of what they went through, what they sacrificed. You know, with the greatest generation, honoring them. How can I ever honor them enough? Possibly in my lifetime. There's no way. No way. Yes.
You really have a unique set of skills where you have kind of free range imagination with judicious research. You know, it's a really interesting combination of skills that you're able to put together and to have such incredible creations.
Well, I'd say thank you, but I'll say I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. You know, and I got a really late start. I was in my 50s. I always knew I was supposed to write. When I was in middle school, I was on my aunt's farm. My aunt lived on this farm once, and I was out by this creek, and I was having this experience. It's like, oh, I just know I'm supposed to write, blah blah blah, and I wrote this poem. And well, that's one thing. It's another thing to actually do it, and then as an adult, you know, to put yourself out there. It's like your naked body you're throwing out there, and to get the confidence. That's the kind of inner thoughts I had all those years, and so I taught a lot of people writing, expository writing at the college level, and I was a great cheerleader. And then then I was nominated to go to a writer's retreat for educators in Oregon, and during that week, my husband was in Iraq for 14 months at that time, and I had nothing else to think about, except doing the assignments that our instructors gave us to do, and that got me going. That was the beginning. I had no idea that all the rest of this would come about, and I really did. And I'm very grateful that it did. Yeah, and I'm still able to do that. So I plan to keep on as long as I can. I wrote a series, and it's this, and this. These 3 books. This is how ignorant I was. So here I was, a college professor, adjunct professor. So you think, oh well, so it was easy for her. You know, not at all. It was a huge learning curve. I was teaching expository writing, which is your basic essay, right? Making things clear. Got to get that just perfect on the page. It's got to be clear. It's got to be researched. Blah blah blah. Well, this is a whole other world. I'd never heard of a character arc or anything to do with fiction, really. I was an avid reader, so I had all that in my heart, in my head, which was wonderful, you know. So when I first wrote this character came to me. I started writing, and I just wrote like a complete fool. I mean, just nonstop. It was ridiculous. It was so unhealthy. And that's the way I do things.
You're a binge writer.
Yeah, exactly. And so it went on, you know, it's 2 girls who graduate from high school in Iowa, and they both marry right away. That's what a lot of girls did then. And the one married an RAF pilot. And so her husband went off to England and started, he was to fight off the Luftwaffe. And he gets downed, his plane gets down, and she's a gutsy girl, and she takes the Red Cross ship, volunteers on it, and gets herself over there to find him in some makeshift hospital in London. And so that's the kind of girl she is. Her friend, Addie, she marries an Iowa farmer and is completely unaware of who he really is and what he's really like. It's one of those stories, and he's just extremely emotionally abusive, and she has no idea. All she knows is she's going to a place where there's going to be food on the table every night. There's cows, there's chickens, there's hogs, and eggs, and she's not going to be hungry anymore. She's not going to have her own father abusing her. Okay, so she thinks this is a wonderful thing, and then she discovers what he's really like. And so that's the beginning of that. Well, I went on and on and on. I went on about Kate in London and Addie in Iowa, and I had 300,000 words. And I mean, these books are around 90,000. I'm like, what do I do now? Well, so I split it into 2 books. And then I realized, no, it's really 3. A couple of years later, you know. So I didn't do this the easy way. As my husband said, have you been to the clearing? So you know, there's this building called the schoolhouse. All right, and so I'm taking this path from the lodge to the schoolhouse for the very first time, a couple days before everybody else came in, and I'm walking along the path. My husband, just take that path. There you go. So I'm not logistically astute, and so I'm taking the path. And I see the schoolhouse, that's pretty obvious, and there's a path going down with this rusty iron railing, and I think, oh, that doesn't look too good, and I broke a leg a little over a year ago, and it's been a pretty tough recovery, and I think, well, if that's what I have to do, I'll have to do it. So I grab the railing and I take myself down there and I go in and find my room that we're going to be teaching in my class. And then, wouldn't you think I maybe try the other door, try to go around the other way? No, it's like, okay, I know how I have to get out of here. This is the door I came in, so I go back up it. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. But that path kept going around to the front. But you give me one sign, I take it. Right? I mean, so I'm saying I don't, so I tell Lance this. I said, come with me, show me an easier way. There's gotta be an easier way. This can't be how everybody gets down there. It just can't be. And he's like, well, no, it's not. If you just would have stayed on the path, it would have taken you to the front door. Okay? I mean, and so he just looks at me and says, it's like he's gritting his teeth kind of, it's like, oh, you never do anything the easy way. And that is the truth. I haven't done any of this the easy way. If there is an easy way, I didn't do that. You can count on that. But it's gotten easier as I've gone. Now I kind of know what I'm doing, after this many.
You said you changed publishers. What caused you to change and how did you find the second one?
Oh, well, it was actually the third. The second one, I changed because when I put that first book out about Dottie and the boarding house, they had a really good editor, so I learned a lot through the process. But when it came time to do the covers, they said to me, they emailed me and said, send us a picture you kind of think would fit. I don't know anything about graphic art, and that's just not my forte. Well, I thought, what do they say? So I found this picture that I thought, well, this would work, but, they're 20 years too young. They gotta make them look older, they gotta put some gray in here, they gotta give her a little jowl here or something. Well, they didn't. They used that picture. And so my characters were in their late 50s. And these people on the cover were in their 20s. And looked like Lucy and Desi in their younger years, So that was one thing. Let's just say, and a cover's really important, really, really important. So that was the main thing, actually. Yeah. And so then the next time I saw another one, and this one that I have now. Let's see, why did Well, because the one in the middle was my memoir, and they were not looking for fiction. They were great, but they were not looking for fiction, so I didn't even send them a manuscript. That's what I started looking for, the one I found now. Yeah.
Did you just search for them?
I went to conferences, writing conferences, where you can, for a fee, you can meet for 10 minutes with an editor or a publishing house or an agent.
So you went through an interview process, basically.
Basically, yeah. And that's not how I found them. I found them both on the internet. These last two publishers. And that's where I can't tell you exactly how. I just know that one day this name popped up and I thought, that sounds interesting. And I read about the publisher. He was a former Green Beret. I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff was going to have military kind of tentacles and groundings, and thought that might work, And so I emailed him, and then I was impressed because he said, well, I never send anyone a contract until we have a phone conversation. And we did. It was like 45 minutes long. He was very interested in my life, family. I asked him lots of questions, about process also and what he had to offer. So that's how that happened. Yeah. And we've been together ever since, and he's really, really great. If he just had more time and ability to promote. The dream is always that you'll be discovered, even if you've got this publisher. Somebody will pick up one of these, somebody from,
Oprah's best friend.
There you go. And suddenly you'll be discovered in a big way. That would be wonderful. Or somebody will want to make a movie out of one of my books. But to be honest, this is all earned, it's all real. I've never colored my hair. And I'm too tired at this point. I'm way too tired to even try with that. I don't know, I just keep writing and there they are. So, yeah. Any more questions? I don't know what time it is, but I'm sure it must be
3 o'clock.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being so attentive and your questions. You're interesting.